Okay, so today, Clayton and we're going to talk more about what's happening in the metaverse. We're going to talk about the bull and bear case for both Unstoppable Domains and ENS. We're also going to talk about Sandbox, how to optimize for these experiences, and potentially things that we like outside of the Sandbox. So Clayton, how do you want to get started?
Well, I want to talk more about how we came up with the name, Hello Player One. What was the you led that? So what was your reasoning for that?
Yeah. So when we first talked about doing the podcast, right, we really wanted to talk about what we thought was coming up, right? What's next in NFT development, metaverse, gaming, digital fashion, and I was trying to find a name that was relevant to metaverse, but not using the name metaverse or meta, because one, there was just so many podcasts out there that were using these names. There was the obvious choice for us would have been Metaverse Podcast. Sure, that's long taken. There's Metaverse Hour, right? Hello Metaverse. These are cool names, but they're taken. And so had we chose anything with the word metaverse in the podcast title, we would have gotten lost in the shuffle, especially since we're starting out. So I didn't want anything to do with metaverse or meta, because meta is sort of tricky because the word is trademarked, right, used to be Facebook. So, I don't think they'll come after you, but it's just confusing, and they could, depending on how you use it. So I didn't want anything to do with metaverse. I also didn't want a podcast named the Tentango Podcast, because that would have been confusing for what Tentango does, right? Tentango, we build stuff in the metaverse. The podcast is more about education in what's coming up in the metaverse, and I didn't want those to be confused. And so those were the two big things. Let's see what else. So I actually spent a long time brainstorming the names, and I think I had over 100 names. And our first choice would have been What's Next, because it just sounds cool. Hey, what's next in the metaverse? What's next in NFT development? It made a lot of sense. But when I did a search on Google to see if there was a podcast named What's Next, there wasn't, but there was a podcast named What Next. And it was a very popular podcast with, I think, over 1 million subscribers on YouTube. So again, it would have been confusing if someone searched for What's Next. There's also the apostrophe S, and that's not something people normally type in. Again, it would have been confusing. It would have been nice had we had that, because it would have broad enough where we can talk about everything around metaverse, gaming, marketing, but not so niche. So after that, brainstormed some more, and we came up with a short list that I showed you. And one of the ones we both liked was Hello Player One. It was cool because it was somewhat gaming related, and we believe gaming is going to eat into every single industry out there, right? Digital fashion. It's also metaverse related because it's a spoof on Ready Player One. And I think when people see it, they recognize that it's going to be about the metaverse. So yeah, that's I think how we came up with it. What were your thoughts?
I remember we came up with a few other ones, was it Ready Player Click was one.
Ready Player Click, yes.
Yeah. I was getting very very picky on why I didn't like that one. I just don't like the word click, which is very very pointed to why I don't like it. But it was a good option. And then one of the one we had, I selected
GameFi.
GameFi was one. One of the reasons why we didn't go with GameFi is because of how a lot of these words are very trendy. And in crypto, play to earn was the big buzzword last year. Now it's turned to play and earn. So
right.
We're more concerned with GameFi being the current buzzword. And then 5 years from now, if we're still doing this, we've got this old term that no one even really understands fully. It's just totally dated, or it's very cliche. So yeah, that was the main thing why I didn't like the GameFi thing. And Hello Player One, I'm a fan of the book, so it just kind of rolls off the tongue too. It's not like the click word; it's just like kind of a harsh word. And I liked Hello Player One as more of a smooth phrase. So I mean that was really my reasoning.
Yeah, I think I forgot to mention that, I did a search on Hello Player One podcast. There's nothing out there. Right? There's other podcasts using other variations of the word Radio Player One, but there's nothing out there for Hello Player One. And so I knew that we could, one, brand it very easily, and two, we would be up in the search rankings very easily for people that search Hello Player One, right? They would search for our podcast name. That's something that's not thought about often. So, for example, our name Tentango, I actually see people search for that name. They search that word in Google, right? They've heard of it somewhere and they search for it. It would have been a lot harder if, let's say, our studio was called Metaverse Creative Studio, right? Like they would search for that. They would get a bunch of other people's names because it's so generic. So that's the nice thing about being able to brand it. Of course, in the beginning, you don't get the search traffic, but that's fine because you can brand it and it grows over time.
Very cool.
Yeah. All right, so let's jump into ENS and Unstoppable. So Clayton, this is a topic that you know very well, and we're going to cover some really interesting things. But why don't we start off with Unstoppable? Let's talk about what you believe is the bear and bull case, or flip it around, bull and bear case for Unstoppable Domains.
Yeah, so I'm overall bullish on Unstoppable, but I don't think it's going to be a smooth transition. I think a lot of the naming services are going to probably be fine in 5 years. The main thing is that they will be competition in the traditional Web 2 world for these TLDs, top-level domains, like .crypto, .wallet. They do not own the domains that they have in Web 3. The reason why that is a potential problem is ICANN, who is the governing body of domain TLDs of the internet, they often issue out auctions or ways for purchase these TLDs. So at some point,
sorry, quickly, like when you say they don't own the domain in, I think you mentioned Web 3, but you mean that they don't own the domain in Web 2, right?
Correct. They do not own the Web 2 version of that, which is fine. But the problem is we want to onboard a lot of people. And whenever you have these potential collisions, like there's no collision now. No one has .wallet in the DNS, the traditional Web 2 world. So there's no collision. But if ICANN offers up these extensions that Unstoppable has, and Unstoppable does not get those extensions, then there will be potential collisions at a few areas. One is the client, which a client could be a browser, would not know where to look up, let's say I have Clayton.wallet. It would not know if someone has bought, let's say Google buys .wallet, and you type in Clayton.wallet into Chrome. It's going to go to Clayton.wallet. It's going to go to DNS lookup, that resolver, and find the IP address of where Clayton.wallet is at. Ideally, you would want something like the browser to know, like, okay, this is a .wallet extension. I should look in the Web3 network on-chain type data. So I need to go that path. So that is a potential collision in terms of it'll be confusing for the client to choose which one. And there's a few of those that Unstoppable Domains has. I think the safest one would probably be .x, because I don't think there are any .x TLDs, or I don't think it's possible for that currently in the Web 2 TLD registration.
Wait, so why is that?
I don't know the reason why.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know the reason. I don't think there's a technical reason. It's just they probably didn't do it, and they potentially probably could at some point, but it's the lowest risk of the current ones. And then, yeah, so there's that kind of collision. And then one thing with ENS, they're definitely the front runner in terms of, I would say, credible. Like, it's the cool one. We talked about last one of the podcasts, we talked about how Bored Apes or CryptoPunks has the old school following, the OGs, and it's the one that we think will be 10 years from now. That's the one you'd want to have in your wallet as a CryptoPunk. .eth, I would imagine, is going to be the front runner of that as well, of the current extensions. So let's say all scenarios, they all work. Like Unstoppable gets all the .wallets, they actually get .crypto and all those things. I think .eth is still going to be like the .com of Web3. It's not entirely true it's not entirely certain because, a lot of people don't like Ethereum, so they might not want a .eth address. So you don't know how favoritism is going to play in it, and that's why .x could be a big name in the future as well, because it's agnostic to chain, so it might be more popular than .eth. But anyways, so yeah, one of the things that ENS offers is, I don't know if they offer it yet or if they're going to offer it, but they offer wrappers for traditional domain holders to wrap their extension into the ENS infrastructure. And what that means is that Google.com, Google can say, hey, we own Google.com. Let's assign it to an ENS registry, and then we can tie addresses that we want to tie to Google.com. So they technically would have you could technically send, if Google does that, you could technically send, and they have an ETH address registered to that, you could send to that address, like Google.com, you could send crypto or ETH to it, and it would resolve to their wallet they've registered. Now that also would introduce a potential collision on the Web3 level. If, let's say Google buys .wallet and Unstoppable Domains is using the Web3 version of that. What if they wrap .wallet into the ENS infrastructure? Now you don't even know which Web3 .wallet you want to send to. So those are the things that are going to be a really heated discussions in the next 5 to 10 years. Probably don't take 10 years, but 5 years or so, on like what are going to be the primary ways to send crypto from a domain perspective. And yeah, so I would not be surprised. The bear case is for Unstoppable is they rug a few of the holders certain TLDs, like .wallet could be rugged, .crypto could be rugged. And I think that would hurt them as a brand. But the thing is, and that might be like, I think because they're a private company versus ENS is meant to be more of like a public good type infrastructure, that they will move just as fast or much faster than ENS. I think they'll catch up to ENS in terms of integrations potentially. And I think that will be a beneficial, because what their motive is to shoot first, ask questions later. They're hyper aggressive in terms of trying to integrate with other services. So whenever ICANN potentially releases these domains, that they have priority because they already have a large enough integration platform and user base that can justify them having this domain. So that's what they're doing. They're going hyper aggressive. They're doing the Airbnb and Uber tactics of just enable us for countries that might not be legal yet in those countries, and just let them have the lawyers work it out later type thing. So that is what Unstoppable's strategy is, and I can 100% see that working because it's worked in a lot of tech scenarios. So yeah, and I think one of the bear cases I have with ENS is the DAO part of ENS. I think that's too soon. I think it's great. I think DAOs are going to be the future for sure. I think they're going to be one of the more regulated bodies of crypto in the future, because I think they will actually compete with actual governments. Like you'll have a DAO that can raise funding instantly, which has not been able to. It's more difficult in the current like Web 2 infrastructure. Now it's like you can send crypto. The whole Ukraine thing, people are sending crypto to Ukraine. Like these things are going to be very powerful the more and more people onboard to crypto. So DAOs will by default become more powerful. But the current types of DAOs that I see, I think they're not ideal. Mainly because one of the worst parts of current politics is how coupled money is to decision making. And now the current models most of the current models I've seen in Web3 is like, okay, let's make the voting mechanism directly correlated to how many tokens you have. So that seems like a terrible idea in general. It's like, okay, let's take the worst of traditional world and apply it to Web3 and make that the core part of voting. So I think it was not a good idea for ENS to do that. It almost comes across as like, hey, let's get rich. I don't know if that's their motives. They seem pretty, I'm an ENS fan, but I thought that was a mistake. Because what's to stop? Let's say Michael Saylor, he's like, I don't know if you've seen the meme of him saying that there's no second best. It's only Bitcoin, that kind of thing. What if he goes like rogue and he says there's no second best and he just buys all the ENS tokens and he pretty much makes it, okay, now you have to integrate on, Lightning Network. So you can still manipulate these stupid DAOs just by big spinners, because if an institution wants to buy the tokens to control this DAO or whatever DAO, they can. There's nothing stopping them from doing that. I think are getting a huge voting power. So I think it was premature to do those things, and that's the bearish case on ENS, and why I think Unstoppable has a legitimate chance for these kind of things, because they're already privatized. They aren't trying to promote that they're decentralized. They might work towards it later, but they can move fast now. They don't have to do like to jump through the voting tools that they can see. Okay, a trend is happening. ENS is doing something. Let's just copy it or do something similar and move faster than them. So that's one of the benefits of being a private company. And then we can work later once we've established our footing, then spread out to make it essential. So those are going to be really interesting competitions happening between those two companies. Or I don't even call them both companies, but I view them as companies, but people would disagree on that. Or other domain TLD providers for Web3. Because I think there's already legal issues with Unstoppable trying to fight some other company with .wallet, which we saw the other day. So there's even fighting amongst the Web3 TLDs, let alone once the ICANN releases some of these for auction in the future. Like there's more conflict on that. So yeah, I think that's the big pushers is how things are going to play out.
Yeah, you just talked about that there's a case happening right now where another company is offering .wallet domain names, yeah. Presumably in the Web3 world, because like you said, the .wallet domain, like Web2 world hasn't been released yet. And what's interesting is that this case, it shows how many domain names that Unstoppable has already sold. And let me try to pull up, it's somewhere in the hundreds of thousands. And so they're arguing in court that, hey, we already have a big footprint. They're asking a judge to say, hey, shut down the other company. So just like you said, they're moving very fast, and it's crazy how much money they raise, because I was like, why do you need that? It's just a domain system, right? But, it's, a lot of times to pay for lawyers to fight out cases in court.
Yeah, that I think they're going to be a hyper aggressive company, and they're going to diversify out. They'll build other products. Like they'll work on the integrations now, and try to get as many integrations and build up that core user base, so they have a case whenever ICANN releases these domains. Like .NFT is going to be highly fought after. .crypto will probably be highly fought after. .wallet, all these things will be very fought after, and lawyers will be fighting over that for a while, I'm sure. But yeah, I think lost my train of thought. What was I gonna? What did I say before that? I lost my train of thought on that one.
Just how ICANN will release, when they release these domain names, they are top level domains that
Oh,
there'll be a
I remember now.
big
I
fight
remember now.
over.
So, yeah, so they'll be that, but they'll also, like, once they have their established user base and they have the integrations they want, I think that they will start to diversify as a company and build other products. So, a big raising of funding is going to probably go towards innovation in adding value on top of the domains they currently have, like whether it be they're building something similar to, I don't know, what are some of the widget type website builders you can do in the traditional world?
Yeah, like Squarespace.
Yeah, something like
WordPress,
that. They
for
might
example.
turn their company into that after that, and maybe they'll turn the domain part of it a DAO later once they have the footing, and then they can turn that into DAO, and then they, as a company, would pivot to integrate or to build other products. I think that's probably where the raised funds comes from, on top of you need to have, for lawyers too. So it'll be,
Yeah.
they're going to be hyper competitive and hyper aggressive. They're taking a Web2 company playbook for sure on how they're establishing a footing.
Yeah, so on the other thing about ENS, or .eth. So when I was looking for names, right, for our podcast, and there's websites where you can search for the name, like our handle, so that you can make sure you can get that same handle name on across social media platforms, right? Same thing with, when you're looking for a .com, right, a domain name, you put in the word and it searches whether that .com is available, and if it's not, it also shows you, if .net is available, .org, right? Now, the other day I was searching for just, Hello Player One, and what I found so interesting is that, so this website I used, brandsnag.com, it now lists whether .eth is available for the name. This is a Web2 website telling you should get .eth. You should make sure that it's available. That's crazy.
And that's why I think .eth is currently the favorite. It's the one I have several of both ENS and Unstoppable Domains. If I were to gun to my head, putting money down in Vegas, like which is going to be, if there's going to be one winner, it'd be ENS. But yeah, I think Unstoppable will get to that point. Like, the thing is, they have to prove that they are going to truly have these TLDs in the Web 2 way infrastructure, because I think that will probably slow integrations down, especially if they're rugging certain customers. Like, someone buys .wallet and they rug everyone that owns .wallet. That's going to hurt the integration partnerships as well that they've already integrated with. So other people might be slower to integrate with Unstoppable, even though they're hyper aggressive, because they don't know how it's going to play out in the future. And you'd hate to, build something and then find out that they are integrate with them and you realize, oh, you can't do this anymore because someone bought the traditional world. But ENS, like, they have the clout, like they have the like, if you're a non-paid celebrity, not Shaq.soul or anything like that, because he put that in his Twitter handle. They usually have like a .eth name. So yeah, it's crazy to see that starting to see Web 2 worlds realize that, okay, you need to have your branding in .eth, and maybe at some point you'll see some .crypto or .wallet ones, but for foreseeable, I think .eth is going to be the player.
Yeah, I do like the fact that Unstoppable has domain names that could be used, that's agnostic. Because like you said, there are people that don't like Ethereum, right? Bitcoin maxis, right? They could just not get a .eth name just to spite, right? Even though it's the thing, like, even though it's like the .com equivalent, which it is at this point for Web3.
Mm-hmm.
So I am looking heavily into .x, whether it's going to be a good investment. So wanted to
I would,
ask
at the
about.
very least, if people are like curious, at the very least, of what to get, I would just get the ones. If you're viewing from an investment perspective, .eth would probably be the safest of them. But I would get the ones you care about across all of the domains, just in case, because you'd hate to have one and then you find out they fall over, like they aren't moving fast enough and the integration slow down, those things, and you can't use it anywhere. So you'd better to hedge against something you'd actually use, because I think these would be very right. I think domain names are going to be much more powerful in Web3. I think everyone who's in Web3 agrees on that, or for the most part. So I'd hedge your bets on getting ones that you truly want to use long term for yourself across all of them.
So I wanted to ask about the .eth Web2 domain, right? Because you mentioned that that's actually owned by Ethiopia, or that resolves to, right? Like, explain that part, because doesn't ENS have to eventually buy out the .eth Web2 domain?
So my understanding is this. I'm not an expert on this, but ICANN or whoever distributes the TLDs that are relevant to the governments. So .us, the US government would have that one. .eth, Ethiopia technically has. They technically are the direct owner of that. I believe they use a different TLD for their government website. I don't know what it is. I can't remember off the top of my head what it is. But my understanding is, in this reading from Brantley Milligan, he's one of the main ENS people. He always has some good threads on ENS in general. He mentioned that, this is a while ago, he mentioned that they have a partnership with Ethiopia, the government. I don't know if that's like a formal, written on paper thing, or it's like, internet handshake, high five over Zoom type thing. I have no idea what the formalities of that is, but but my understanding is that Ethiopia owns .eth, and they're willing to let .ens, or not .es, the ENS provider to have .eth in the Web2 and Web3. So they basically have it, an agreement with this country, is my understanding. But they technically do not own it in Web2 world.
Got it. Okay. Cool. Anything else you want to add on this?
Let me think. No. No, I got everything on my notes, so we can.
All right. Cool. All right. So we're going to jump from ENS, right, to the Sandbox, and the topics are pretty varied, but Clayton here is the expert that I know of on Unstoppable and ENS, and I do a lot in the Sandbox. So I wanted to mention what I think is a very important metric to look at in terms of rating what a good alpha season experience would be. I was looking at the alpha season leaderboard on the Sandbox. So you can find this just on the webpage and go to leaderboards. I noticed that they're rewarding the top 10,000 players with sand tokens. Of course, the 1,000 to 10,000 player doesn't get that much sand, but they do get something. So I came to realize that there's probably at least 10,000 players that go through each experience in alpha season. At least 10,000, maybe more. I think a conservative number might be close to 15, maybe 20,000 that at least start the experience, but maybe not complete it. So that is because in order to win sand, to place on a leaderboard, you have to complete quests inside each of these experiences. And these quests reward you with what's known as ethel points. Ethel points is what gets you ranked on the leaderboard. So it's advantageous really to the players that want to win sand to not only play every experience, but to complete every experience. So that's where I say that I think at least 10,000 people go through each experience, at least. So that's quite a lot of people for a 1 to 2 month period where you have at least 10,000 players playing 20 to 30 minutes of your experience, right? That's a big time to spend inside like a marketing activation. So that's what I came to realize is it's a long time that people are spending. Now, when I looked at where I was, I did play every experience. I didn't finish every single one though. There were a few that I finished. There were ones that I didn't finish because I just didn't think they were fun. And so I didn't get to do all of it because it was very grindy. And so when I looked at my where I was on the leaderboard, I wasn't even on the top 10,000. So I realized there's probably a lot of players like me that just wants to play for fun, just to check out what the metaverse has to offer, what the sandbox has to offer, but aren't there necessary to win sand. They'll check out the experience. If it's fun, they'll play all the way through. If it's not, they'll drop off maybe in the first 5 minutes. So I think it's very important for brands that are entering in the sandbox when they're creating experience to think about how they can optimize for the most percentage of people to complete the experience. It's hard to say like what that number is, but in my head, I'm just thinking 50% at least, probably higher, right? So how do you optimize for that? I like to think of it as retention in mobile. So in retention, someone installs a game today. Do they come back tomorrow? Do they come back the next day? Do they come back the day after? There is a benchmark in mobile where a couple of years ago, it used to be 40, 20, 10. And that meant 40% of players should come back on day one, meaning the next day that they install the app. 20% should come back on day 7 or 7 days since they install the app. And 10% should come back on day 30. And those are the minimum benchmarks. So I try to use that framework to look at what percentage of players should complete the experience. So if we're looking at it like that, I think the first quest, right? Let's say each experience only has 5 quests. And the experience, because of that, rewards 5 ethel points, right? You would think that you want these quests to all be completed roughly, if the experience is 30 minutes, that each quest should take 6 minutes to complete, right? Because you're dividing the 30-minute playtime into 5 quests. But I think that's actually not how I would do it. I think I would do the first quest should be completed within the first 30 seconds. The next one maybe will take 2 minutes. The next one, more. The next one, more. And it's because you want the fun factor to be, you want the players to get the fun factor immediately within the first 30 seconds, right? Because that's how people would design games in mobile, is they get the fun very quickly. So that's how I would try to optimize for, is almost like an exponentially decrease in the time that players complete these quests. And by the time that they get to the last quest, hopefully they're engaged enough that they'll finish the quest, even though it takes longer. So that's the main metric I would look at and how to optimize for. Now, there's a lot of things I think brands or developers can do once they have the players who complete the quest. So Sandbox gives the developers all the wallet addresses of the players that complete the experience. So let's say that there's 5,000 players that completed experience. The developers will get all that 5,000 wallets. What you can do is, right at this point, it's mainly an engagement and marketing play. You can incentivize those 5,000 users to join your Discord, because you have to join the Discord in order to get some type of NFT giveaway, or get into an NFT giveaway or to get a physical item. There is actually, if getting Discord members is important, right? There's an actual dollar amount to getting Discord members. If I were to run Facebook ads to drive users to join the Discord, it's roughly $1, $2. And so if we're looking at it like that, there is a direct correlation to how much money someone would get just from getting people into a Discord. So I think that's cool. So that's how we're optimized for the Sandbox experience, for at least right now for alpha season.
And for a gameplay perspective on, because you want to start smaller quests sooner than later, do you include a tutorial with that as part of the quest? Like, how much of that is going to be like learning the mechanics of the game and then actually like doing something more interesting with the game?
Right. So I like to think that the game itself is probably a big tutorial. That's, I think, a really good way to think about it.
And what's the reason for that? Just because we're pretty much capping it at 30 minutes. It's like tough to actually have a game outside of a tutorial.
Right. And also, I think what's fun is that the players keep learning something new. So in Mario, like old school Mario, there's different elements that are introduced, like different enemies that are introduced. At least, like the example I'm thinking of is like Super Mario 3. Right? That's my favorite Mario game. And so in World 1, you have certain enemies. In World 2, you have new enemies. And then at the end of the game, you might have a combination of all of them. So they're slowly being introduced, and the mechanic of how they work are slowly introduced to the player, so they're not all of a sudden like thrown at them. So it's technically, right, that game, it's like a tutorial all the way through.
So let's say you're a game developer and you've got the 30-minute experience and you wanting to, because I think at some point, landowners or people who build games, they'll want to integrate brands into their experience separately. So let's say you have a really good game for Alpha Season 3. Let's say you want to market this to a brand that's not in Web3 yet. Maybe it's a local brand that, like, hey, we'll put a pointer to something you're working, like a product that you have in our game. How would you gather metrics to sell the potential of adding something to your experience in terms of a marketing perspective? I don't know if that made sense, but I think that there's opportunity for that.
Yeah, I think brands basically have two options to enter in the sandbox. They could create an experience around their brand, product, or story, right? So in that case, the game has to be designed exclusively for them. Of course, the downside is it's more expensive. The other option might be it's like a product placement, but more immersive. So I don't know if this is true, right? But when I saw one of the experiences in the current alpha season and they had Azuki's there, I didn't think that it was a great tie-in. I didn't think that the experience was built for Azuki's. I felt that Azuki's did a product placement with this experience. I think it's a good one because, again, maybe 20,000 people go through that experience. So now Azuki's, the NFT collection, just exposed who they are, their NFT collection to 20,000 people. Right? Mm-hmm. I think that's one way to do it. The other way, I'm trying to think of like a brand, like Warner Music, like they created the single player game for one of their artists. That's cool, right? Because then you know about the artist, you know about the artist's story, so it's become more relatable for all his fans and fans that don't know about him. So I think there are two options.
I think too that at some point there'll be like scenarios like Marvel Universe where if you watch a Marvel movie, there's always a after the credits, Samuel L. Jackson's usually coming on. We've got some monster or whatever. I think in the metaverse, you'll see some of these experiences that are like a lot of these brands will have after the game's finished. There'll like be a moment of that where they can tie into a different experience. Like, hey, you need to fight in this experience as well. Like, I don't know. I think there's opportunity for that as well. And it's all going to be tied to marketing and building a brand and trying to have users jump from experience to experience. I think is going to be very powerful.
Yeah, you're talking about cross promotion.
Yeah.
At least that's the term.
The professional term. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the term we use in mobile. So I remember, let's say like a gaming studio, right? They created one game. They, in order to drive traffic to the next game, they would just put the ads of that next game inside the first game, right? And then after they create the second game, they create the third game, fourth game, fifth game. Their network of users grow exponentially because all they're doing is promoting their own game to their own portfolio of games. That concept will exist in the metaverse or in these virtual worlds like Sandbox. I think primarily in Sandbox. It's a little harder to do, I think, in Decentraland. But the Sandbox, you're going from like one experience to another experience. You're basically jumping from game to game to game. So there will be some form of cross promotion.
Yeah, and
how that's done will be interesting.
Yeah, it seems like it'll be more immersive, and that's the big thing that I think companies will really value is how closely or how immersive you get with your fan base or potential new people coming in. It's just a different connection you'd have versus the game. The example you mentioned with the phone is like, okay, you get an ad pop up that says, okay, click this, download that. That's a different funneling into that game where if you do something like the Marvel Universe in theaters is like you tease something at the end of the game or you have a direct portal to another game after you finish this one that loosely ties into, this world or a collaboration. That will keep people dialed into the experience. So I think it's going to be a very powerful mechanism for people to onboard and keep people in their brand.
Yeah, I think this kind of ties into whether like location is important in the Sandbox. Because, if what we're talking about is true, that a game studio or a creator wants to cross promote their games from one game to another, then at the end of an experience in the Sandbox, they're going to have a portal that goes to the other game, right? Like you don't have to go from the games don't have to be next to each other. You can go from portal and then jump all across the map. So then in that case, is location even that important?
I'd be very shocked if they did not introduce portals in that way in Sandbox. I know they mention it in I haven't seen the diagrams for this in a long time, but they have diagrams where it's like estates have the top right corner. You can have a portal. I think what's going to happen is you'll be able to buy portals and put them wherever you want a user to potentially go to a new experience. And it won't be a single spot. And yeah, to your point, is like, does land location matter? They'll have to potentially use different mechanisms to make it matter. And one we've heard about, it was an obscure interview I heard Seb talking about, where he said that they potentially would open up, like if you live by Walking Dead, you have a premium land near Walking Dead, you could use Walking Dead assets in your game. So that would definitely add value. If you're next to, let's say Halo buys a Sandbox parcel, and I can have Master Chief in my game, like I'm all in. So that's another way to add value to land while keeping it location based. But they shouldn't make it so difficult to get to some other place that you want to funnel. Like if I want to stay in a Walking Dead theme, and I want, a different parcels in a location of the map where it's not close to that, but I still want to stay in that theme. I'd rather portal to that than have to exit the game, go to the web, like whatever other mechanism to get there. I think they'll have to allow that to happen.
Yeah.
And they'll have to add value to being close to The Walking Dead, like physically close in a different way. That's my thinking.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's all I have on the Sandbox. At least that was my thought of the week.
Cool.
You want to jump into what other metaverses we like?
I'm trying to think if we want to do that or if we stay on the Sandbox theme. So I wanted to talk more about last week I described about the skyscraper and hub stuff. I'd like to articulate that better.
Okay.
And that we can stay in the Sandbox theme. And then if we want to keep going, we can do like the ones we like and those things.
Yeah.
Do you have a preference on that? Or?
Yeah, let's maybe talk more about the skyscraper concept that you want to elaborate more on.
Okay. How do you want to transition to it away?
No, you can just, if you have thoughts on, we can just go right into it.
Okay. So one of the things too that I find interesting with Sandbox is we just kind of talked about these portals. Another way that they can stack value on top of land while keeping location somewhat relevant, although it may not be related to relevant location. But I think that the bull and bear case on Sandbox is going to heavily rely on how strict they keep the land land cap. And I don't mean expanding it in width. I mean, I think what they'll do is they'll expand up and they'll create hubs or this skyscraper type concept that you see. An example would be like Manhattan, where there's no land that you can add on the Manhattan island. So what people do is they build up. They build skyscrapers. I think for Sandbox to be successful in the long term, I think they're fine short to medium, but in the long term is they need to lower the friction between creators and gamers or experienced people. And a way to do that is you would allow landowners to build up the skyscraper. And what I mean by that and why that would be powerful is because a landowner does not necessarily mean that they're going to be a good developer, a good game developer, or a land developer. They may not be able to, bring in concerts. They may not be able to bring in these experiences. They may not have the skill set. They may have just bought land to flip later. And that is going to be very harmful to the long term of Sandbox, where it's going to be hyper competitive once other companies realize how much, like we just talked about the metrics in terms of how immersive and how valuable that can be to bring on fans and collectors to whatever brand they want. So the metaverse will play in a big part of that. And in order to capture that, it's going to be very highly competitive. So how does Sandbox keep the long-term vision of this? And how do they allow people how do they keep very talented creators on the platform instead of going to another one? One, it's creating a good game maker experience where you can build games. Another is allowing the talented people to build the experiences. And like I said, the game makers, the game landowners, they do not necessarily qualify for that. You just have to have a lot of money to own land. So the concept of a hub would potentially be that I own a parcel of land. I'm either underdeveloping it or my experience, or I want to actually hire someone on my land. But I'm not good at that. I've hired someone who's a bad game maker or whatever it may be, and my land is struggling, or I just don't care at all. I think there'll be a DAO at some point, Sandbox DAO, that is a creator DAO, and if a land is underdeveloped, the DAO will vote to say, hey, this parcel needs high quality content. So let's stack games on top of that. Let's build I don't mean it as a skyscraper in terms of a literal skyscraper, although it could be because Sandbox is very instance based, where if you go to CryptoVoxels or Decentraland, it's persistent world. Like you go to all these parcels. Sandbox is very much instance-based. I think it'll be viewed more in terms of like if you go to the App Store on your phone, you'll click on a land parcel and a bunch of experiences will pop up. And potentially the bigger parcel, the more land experiences that would be stacked on top of the foundational land piece. And that could be more controlled by the community to help drive in traffic or drive in people that want to experience high quality content. And yeah, I think that would lower the barrier for the creators the talented creators that don't necessarily have a lot of money to build and directly connect to their people who want to play those games. I don't see how it could be successful if they keep it very rigid in terms of it's only the 166,000 land parcels and no one but the landowners can own this land. And the way I think this would stack value on the current landowners is that let's say there's 10 community-led experiences on your parcel that are all high-quality content. There could be a designated fee that each parcel would pay the landowner. It'd be a cap fee because you don't want the landowner to abuse owning land. It'd be something that would be agreed upon by the DAO. It says, okay, the landowner gets 2% of the traffic money that goes to this area. And that would allow for investors to capture fees on top of that, and they don't have to necessarily be a good developer, and that guarantees that people are building high quality content. And yeah, I think it's a win-win that way.
Yeah, I was going to say, right now the cap is 166, roughly 1,000, right? 166,000 land, and if each land equals one experience, right? We know that, and we know that's not true because some land are connected, so it's 2x2, 3x3. Mm-hmm. But let's just assume that each experience equals one land. That's only 166,000 experiences. That's nothing. Roblox has millions of user-generated games. So, I think to your point, in order for Sandbox to really compete and take mindshare away from the other virtual worlds, right? And we're calling it virtual worlds because at this point, brands don't care. Brands only care about where they can advertise, right? So from a brand standpoint, right now, they're advertising a lot in Roblox. So if brands want to advertise in the Sandbox, there has to be more than just 166,000 games because more variety drives in more players. Not necessarily, but probably.
Well, it's higher quality content, and the more people you're able to enable to potentially make that higher quality content, the higher chances of people wanting to go there. So capping at the 166,000 is one. Like how many of those? Let's say the current owner or user or the landowner base. How many of them do you think are? I wouldn't even know like an actual statistic, but how many of them do you think are qualified to create a good experience?
Right. No, they all have to outsource.
Yeah.
Right. They all have to go find people that can build exclusively in the Sandbox.
Yeah. And the narrative is for Sandbox is you'll be able to rent your land out, or you'll be able to those things are not it's too much friction early on. It's like rent what out? No one would go to that parcel in the middle of nowhere unless there's already good experiences there. And the way their Sandbox is mitigating that now is the seasons, which is a smart tactic because I know companies landowners in the middle of the map, or not in the middle of the map, but let's say pick anywhere a single square. I'll put it this way: there's 166,000 parcels. And, there's a lot of places where you could click and it might not be a good experience. So it's tough to find, as someone who's searching these, it's not a lot in terms of experiences, but it's tough to navigate finding the good ones when you click on a land parcel. So yeah, it's like I think people view this as it's gonna be very straightforward or very simple for them to like make a profit with having to do very little things. I'll just rent this thing out. No one's going to pay for your parcel of land if no one's going to Sandbox. You have to. There has to be more. I'm stuttering through this one. I might have to edit this one out. Let's revisit this one later. I want to do this one right because I think it's interesting.
Sure. Yeah. There's a lot to talk about in the Sandbox. I think what you're talking about with Manhattan, like as the example, is true. It's not something we think about a lot because, yeah, like Manhattan ran out of land a long time ago, and it built up, but there had to be something to draw people to Manhattan to want to keep building up, right?
Yeah, and that would be opportunity. It's the opportunity to
opportunity
to bring people.
That was also one of the major hubs for immigrants to land, right? Ellis Island. Right. Actually, I didn't land in New York City originally, but I landed in San Francisco, which is also big, right? Also skyscraper.
So I think it's a lot of potential if they allow people to enable their parcels to be more than just a single experience, and they multiple states on your parcel, and potentially bring in allow a community DAO to ensure high quality content's being properly advertised is not the right word, but easily accessible. High quality content is easily accessible.
I also want to add that I really like their way of doing the alpha season. It's much more of a curated way to do a launch, although the product is could be a year away, but it's a curated way of showing what's possible, as opposed to just launching it and it might be crickets. So it's just two different ways of launching. It's very smart because you have this 1 to 2 month period where you have a lot of eyeballs on the Sandbox and all the experiences in it. So it creates a win-win-win for everyone involved. So it's a win for the people that want to try out the Sandbox because they know that they're going to get the best of the best games during that alpha season. So it's a great experience for the players. It's a great experience for the creators of the experiences because they get to put something out there for other advertisers, brands that want to enter the metaverse. They get to put out what they can create there. So it's a win for them. They get players through, so they get the metrics and they see how the engagement is for a Sandbox experience. And it's a win for the advertiser that wants to create something in the Sandbox because they know they're getting a guaranteed amount of users in that experience for a certain period of time. So they have these metrics that they know, like, okay, we know that 20,000 players came through our experience. How does that compare to, for example, running a TV commercial? It's much more comparable that way than create experience and maybe 10 people go in it one day, 1,000 people go in it another day. So I think it's a really good way to doing it.
And if it's done right by the brand, they will have a much more sticky user too. Like if they let's say do an NFT drop, let's say Coca-Cola does an NFT drop, and if you own this NFT, maybe you get a free Coke every month or something. Like if you can tie stack utility on top of this while they own your NFT, it's like one, especially if it's a bigger name, the NFT is advertised in that wallet. Two, the user gets something they own as well as utility on top of the game. So it's like there's different ways for brands to tie into a fan base or someone they want to, interact with.
Yep. Yeah, so lots of things happening in the sandbox, and it's going to be a while, but we'll make sure to cover everything. And there's interesting things we can do in the sandbox. Well, I really want to get your thoughts on the other metaverses that you like, and I'll give mine as well.
Yeah, so the ones that I guess I'm from I'd say I'm the class of 2020 crypto. That's when I joined. So it'd be like what would be my title, I guess?
Wait, did you really join in 2020? That's not the first time you bought crypto, is it?
I bought the peak in I think 2018 was the peak in the last one. I bought like $30
yeah,
of
same here.
Ethereum. Like I was, it was.
Did you sell?
No, I had when I signed back on to Coinbase in 2020. I still had,
Okay.
From
Cool.
that
Yeah.
point.
It's interesting. My first buy was also Ethereum, not Bitcoin.
Yeah. I don't associate. I didn't know what it was at all during 2018. It was just friends had told me, "Hey, buy this," and I did that thing, or they sent me like a referral link, and I got $10 free, stuff like that. I view myself as the class of 2020, where the crypto, like the whole COVID crash. So when I got into that, the ones, and I started getting NFTs, the ones I were paying attention to were mostly artist-based. I didn't find Sandbox until later. I was looking more into CryptoVoxels and Decentraland were the two that I looked at most. I think I don't know which I bought first. I might have bought Sandbox first, though, in terms of land. Oh, and Somnium Space, too. Those are the big ones when I joined were CryptoVoxels, Somnium Space, and Decentraland. Those are the ones I cared the most about because I was in the art world, like exploring more of the art stuff. I like all of them for different reasons. My least favorite in terms of actually using is Decentraland. Somnium Space is more VR based, and I think VR has a long ways to go, but I think it's cool. And then CryptoVoxels I like because it's lo-fi. It's you get these stupid looking these white, I don't know what you can't even call them. The avatars are crazy looking, and you can wear like the wearables are awesome. It's a cool vibe for lo-fi meta world or metaverses. So
It's definitely for artists.
Yeah, artists.
Definitely for just experimenting people that like to experiment.
Yeah, nothing. I really liked CryptoVoxels the most earlier on. I don't view them more. At the time I viewed it as an investment, but I don't think that it seems like they're losing a lot of market share. Market share doesn't sound right, but a lot of users to on Cyber. So there's a new wave that came in the middle of this the last bull market. On Cyber was one of them, and they put in. They don't even sell land, or they do, but it's like you can create a room with your art, with your NFTs, and not have to pay for it. So they have that option. CryptoVoxels does too, but it's not nearly as advertised as on Cyber. On Cyber, the default is you can just create one on the spot. I think if you wanted to have like an artifact themed on Cyber, you have to pay for like an NFT. You have to get the NFT that is tied to that mapping or that floor plan. But the thing is, on Cyber has taken a lot of the art world, it seems like, from CryptoVoxels outside of and I think that they're coming up as one of my favorites going forward. Where I think now CryptoVoxels, which was my favorite, I don't view them as from an investment standpoint, mainly because the way that they've done land releases and things like that, it seems like they really fumbled that, and land value has gone down so much. So in CryptoVoxels, and I don't know if they'll ever bring that up to land value. Other than the saving grace for CryptoVoxels would be if 5 years from now, assuming they don't have a big pivot and make things a lot better, And by better, I mean adding value on people who own land now. I think they need to stack value on top of the current parcels rather than releasing parcels out. They need to focus on that more. They're one of the earlier metaverses, so you could potentially see it as a collector's item type thing. So I think if you own parcels in Origin City or something, that'll be valuable later on, just from the nostalgia point of view. But in terms of future, in terms of utility, On Cyber is probably my favorite. The Somnium Space was up there, but I sold my Somnium Space parcel and I sold my Decentraland parcel. If I were to buy land outside of Sandbox, it would be Somnium Space, probably. But I don't see myself buying anything from them soon. But that's kind of I view the metaverses right now. If I were to rank them, I'll rank them first from when I first be Cryptovoxels in the original one, like 2020 time. Cryptovoxels, Somnium Space, Decentraland. And now I would say it's On Cyber, Somnium Space, Cryptovoxels, Decentraland. So never liked Decentraland. Summaries, I never liked Decentraland.
Okay, so obviously Sandbox is number one because you're ranking the other metaverse. Okay.
I was leaving Sandbox out of that.
Yeah.
How about you? What are your...
Yeah, like I think, like from my perspective, I look at what each metaverse, like what the product fit of each. I don't want to call it metaverse. I'll call it like virtual land or virtual world, because I think we agree that the metaverse is going to be a collection of virtual worlds. I look at the virtual world and see what product fit they have, right? Because ultimately, if it doesn't have utility, it's not going to work, right? So I really like Sandbox because it's a game engine. And so I know that games brings people back to the experience. I know that because I'm in mobile games. So I could see the product fit there. At first, I didn't see the product fit for Decentraland. I thought it was just too much of everything. It's too open. You can do pretty much everything, but really nothing at all because it's not focused. So when, as a founder, right, like what market do you tackle first? Do you tackle everything or do you tackle something first? Now, Decentraland is one of the ones that I do like now, because over time I've seen a market fit that evolved. I've been reading a lot more about what they're good at and what people use it for. Right now, it's poker, online poker. It doesn't sound like a big deal, but again, it starts with a niche, right? They have a niche now because really there is no metaverse where people can go and play online poker. Decentraland is one of them. Because they have users now through playing online poker, brands are now actually starting to pay attention, and they want to build inside Decentraland. Granted, brands are not building games, they're building more light experiences, or the virtual equivalent of a physical location. That's what they're building, but they are building it. So the product fit is evolving, and that's good to see. I also like On Cyber because of the fact that they felt that land, like the scarcity, like why do you need land? Why do you need land? It seems just an added on thing with no utility behind it. That's what my opinion of their view on this is, right? Because instead they're like, okay, let's think about what is the utility that people want in a virtual world. People want, for example, immersive meeting places. And that's not just on cyber. We can see this in Web 2 world where there's other tools out there that are not Zoom, the alternative to Zoom, where it's more immersive. I saw one where you can do a meeting room where it's essentially a 2D game. That's what it looked like to me. This was done on by a Web 2 company. So on cyber, it feels like they came out and said, yeah, we'll create you a utility so that you can have an immersive meeting room if you want without LAN, because we feel that there's no point in that. Right? So think about if you wanted to create immersive meeting room in Decentraland, what would you need to do? You would need to buy the LAN first, right? Mm-hmm. And the LAN is probably really small. But on Cyber, anyone can. You don't have to create the LAN. You don't have to buy the LAN. You can just create a room, and you can actually get people in. Very simple. And so the product market fit that I feel they're going towards is immersive meeting room, and also potentially online NFT gallery. They do really good at that. So I like the metaverses, that virtual worlds that are starting to have their own product market fit.
And I think, so I agree that Decentraland has the up on like the poker stuff. My big concern with Decentraland, similar to what happened with CryptoVoxels, being the art world, a lot of the art people moved from CryptoVoxels to on Cyber. And CryptoVoxels still has its thing. It has a niche market, and I think it's a very unique people who go to CryptoVoxels. I still like going on. I'll still sign on my parcel every now and then in CryptoVoxels because it's pretty fun, pretty interesting. But a lot of the art world was moved to on Cyber. The reason why I'm really bullish on Cyber is because they're doing it in a very modular way, kind of like you mentioned with there's no land parcel. If you're NFT gallery or whatever, you can just create one. But I think what they'll do is they'll modularize a lot of things. They could potentially partner with, let's say they partner with PokerStars. I'm assuming that's still a company. I don't know if back in the day I used to play PokerStars, and I don't know the big online poker companies now, but let's say that the PokerStars is still available. Let's say they partner with PokerStars on Cyber. Now they build an experience they probably have engineers on Cyber that could help onboard the engineers of this partnership. And now they've taken market share from Decentraland Poker. So I think the modular approach, the reason why I think, and we both think Sandbox is different than all of these, is they have the game engine, which I think will be much more difficult to replicate than like poker or NFT galleries. So we put those in different buckets for sure. But I think on Cyber definitely has a potential upper hand on moving faster than Decentraland in bringing on potentially the gambling scene on. Like, so they just partner with like a gambling company. I mean, or a sports book. Like let's say they partner with Caesar Sportsbook or something. That's another thing they can tie on, and they can make it. They don't have to have the land cap that Decentraland has to do that. They can onboard those users. So that's my thing is on Cyber is doing it much smarter with the modular approach.
Yeah, I think the point you're getting at is that the poker in Decentraland requires a lot more things that are not necessary. You don't actually need land to play poker. Like, why do you need that, right?
Yeah. Exactly. And the way that on Cyber is doing is perfect. They're slowly onboarding bigger multiplayer to some degree. Like you can actually have multiple people in a single parcel. So they're slowly building to stress test their system. Like, how many people can we put on this at once? Definitely enough for a poker room. I think that they're going to slowly build out these worlds. And then maybe at some point they do a more formal map where, let's say they have the central piece, which right now it would have to be like a big art collector, Punk 65 something. I can't remember his name, his number. He has a huge art gallery on Cyber. So you can imagine people wanting to partner with being a neighbor there. So maybe they fund, let's say, PokerStars wants to join on Cyber. On Cyber is like, hey, you can have a door attached to this huge art gallery, so people can transport to your poker arena that way. So I think they'll use this more as similar to Sandbox is curating the way that they're doing it now with the seasons, I think On Cyber's just as well positioned to curate a map that is funneling high quality content as well. Where Decentraland, it's much more difficult.
Yeah. So with On Cyber right now, when a player or user joins, I think there's no avatar system yet. It's just like an icon.
Mm-hmm.
But I can see them integrating with Ready Player Me very quickly and very easily.
And other projects.
Once that integrates, it feels like a full metaverse of maybe not metaverse, but full virtual world. That's NFT based. So yeah.
Yeah, and on the Ready Player Me, like imagine they partner with Ready Player Me, and then Ready Player Me becomes the funnel for avatar projects to funnel into all these other worlds. So I think there'll be like a way that you can have a Bored Ape or whatever partnered with Ready Player Me, and now you automatically get that on Cyber too. So it's like these things will have one of the powerful things with the metaverse is chain reactions to other areas where you can use it here. Like your Bored Ape is already be able to use in Sandbox, but if you have a single, because what I think is going to happen with these avatars and long term is you'll have like a Ready Player Me that's going to behave similar to ENS in terms of, okay, let's say you own a Bored Ape, and here's a list of all the assets that you can pull from. Let's say on Cyber, the asset you would need to reach out to is located here. So get that asset and use it on Cyber. Let's say you're in Sandbox. Let's say the Sandbox hasn't implemented this. They have, okay, here's the asset that would, for this Bored Ape, that would work in Sandbox. And let's say they partner, like Halo wants to integrate NFTs. So someone would build the Bored Ape collection in Halo NFTs, and you'd look at, let's say Ready Player Me is a lookup index for that. And you'd see, okay, this is what the Bored Ape in Halo format would look, those kind of things. Or another example is, let's say Bored Apes doesn't make sense in a certain game, but a Bored Ape could represent a sword, like a Bored Ape sword in Skyrim. So you could have a ape sword in Skyrim, those kind of things. So I think they'll be like similar to ENS, where you have these lookup of where your addresses are. You'll be able to look up assets that will be playable in certain games.
Cool. Awesome. So that's all we have. Anything else you want to cover?
No, I'm good.
All right. So, all right. We'll be back next week, I guess.
See you.
Yep.